Okay, good morning, everyone. Thanks for coming, for joining this seminar. I want to start, first of all, saying that this meeting, this seminar will be recorded, and according to international privacy regulations, we have to ask for your consent. So if there is no one who objects to the fact of this seminar being recorded, we can go ahead. Otherwise, if you prefer not to be recorded in your presence, I mean, you can attend the seminar through our YouTube channel. You should have received the web link of the channel when you registered for this seminar. Sara Karamaschi, a postdoctoral researcher at GSSI at our institute, is taking care of the YouTube channel, and she's taking note of questions that will be made by those attending through YouTube. I will, as chair of this seminar, I will collect the question here in the Google Meet room. I'm very happy to have Jun Wang, Professor Jun Wang from City University of Hong Kong at the Department of Public Policy with us. Jun's work focuses on creative cities seen from the point of view, I would say, from a spatial point of view, but also from the viewpoint of the workforce, especially the precarity of the cultural workforce, of the workforce in the cultural sector, which is quite overlooked issue, I think, in general scholarship on creative cities, usually also because of the mainstream representations like that of Richard Florida, most famously, we tend to imagine creative class members, so-called, as affluent and very happy entrepreneurs, while Jun's work, I think, very inspiringly sheds light on quite more problematic condition of people involved in this creative economy and creative scene of contemporary cities across the world. And the fact that she focuses on the Chinese context adds further value to because we know a lot about creative class and creative cities and cultural-led regeneration in the Western context, but there is more limited knowledge about this topic with reference to the East Asian context. So, and she has a very critical perspective, drawing on post-Marxist theory, on assemblage theory. So I think it's a very unique opportunity for us to listen to her talk and to discuss with her these issues. So I think we can start. I take the opportunity also to recall the calendar of our webinar series. The next one will be next Thursday. We usually have two per week, two seminars per week. One on Tuesday and one on Thursday, but next Tuesday in Italy will be national holiday. So we will have the next one will be on Thursday, the 4th of June, with Simona Iammarino, professor at the London School of Economics. And she will, it's a very interesting and very relevant talk, politically, I would say, relevant talk on how monopoly, technology, and finance drive regional inequality. Then we will have Then we will have 2 more seminars, one by Philip McCann on Tuesday the 9th, and one by Andres Rodriguez Pose on the 12th of June. Okay, so far our series has been very successful, and people have been very enthusiastic, and I'm very happy now to host June's talk. Please, June.
Okay, thank you very much, Go, for your kind introduction. Very happy to be here. Good morning, everyone.
Perhaps you can, sorry, perhaps you can enlarge your presentation. Okay, perfect.
Is it fine? Okay, let me just introduce my topic first. This is actually suggested by Ugo. The socio-spatiality of urban creative fairs, a Chinese perspective. This is a project I have been working on for quite a while, for a couple of years, and I'm working on this kind of a new, to me, observe a new kind of urban development. This is very much, that's why I very much appreciate some comments and critiques, if you have any. And also another thing is that actually on this, this is more like a regional development topic, which I will deal with this kind of scholarship on scale and archipelago. So I'm trying to deal with the state apparatus in this process, especially the administrative structure of Chinese state. Let me just get started. So here is just some pictures to show you in China since 2000. There has been a new trend of hosting these kind of fairs. This is actually all a fair called International Cultural Industries Fair, hosted by the city of Shenzhen. And the fair actually started in 2004, and afterwards it becomes more and more popular, and eventually it becomes an annual event. And later on, this kind of a successful urban development strategy has been introduced by the national government to different cities. For example, it started in Shenzhen and quickly moved to many other cities like Xiamen and Yiwu, Beijing. Also covering the northeast, middle land, these kind of regional clusters. And most importantly, this kind of a new trend moved to the west part of China, especially go to the city. You can see this. This is actually a city called Xi'an. This is where the starting point of Silk Road. That's why the Western China, initially it was called Western China Cultural Industry Fair, was renamed as the Silk Road International Exposition. So it becomes a transnational fair, actually across different countries. And more recently, the city of Shanghai also introduced another type of expo, China International Import Expo. If all the other fairs and expos were remaining to sell products made in China to outside world, it's mainly a export-oriented exchange, trading forums. This China International Import Expo is very much trying to attract, try to binding products made in overseas countries into China. So this is very different situation. But anyway, here I'm trying to look at, this is a new attempt by the state actually restructure the landscape towards a node and flow kind of a pattern. On one hand, there is material reconfiguration of economic landscape. In the past, we have different regions in terms of administrative economic zone, but right now they try to reconfigure it to nodes and networks. And another thing is actually, if you pay attention to all these different fairs, all the different expos, it is always another intention actually to build up a discursive construction of nationhood, a geopolitical image of China. And so this is very much put in intertwined impetus of economic and political interests, which is more evident in China. So all these kind of things, when I'm trying to solve this, try to look into this new phenomenon, all these kind of things actually talk to the question of scale, which is very used to be a very hated topic, but not recently. But anyway, allow me to give you a brief introduction of the literature on scale, if in case there's someone not very familiar with this particular topic. The study on scale actually started in the 1970s. Conventionally, it was very much the conventional wisdom on scale basically used three types of metaphors to illustrate the various form of power relationship. So for example, basically there are three types of power relationships, like a ladder from body to urban, regional, national, global. So the higher you climb up the ladder, the bigger power you have. Another metaphor used is the concentric rings. So from body, urban, regional to global, the bigger the size, and then the bigger power you have. Of course, later on, there's also argument to see that actually these kind of two situations are coexisting altogether. So it's more like a rushing door, and they are both different in terms of ladder and scalar relationship, and also in terms of size. So if you look at these three metaphors, the traditional understanding of scale is very much based on the territorial resources and discretional power. So power is based on either how much resources you have within your own boundary, or depend on the institutional power in the administrative structure. And later on, I think because of the contestations, first of all, because globalization, we have the idea of networks. The horizontal networks breaks the boundary of national state, and cities rise up. So there are a lot of debates and contestations around what is scale, whether we understand the scale correctly. Basically, there's a shift from scale, rescaling, to the politics of scale, and to very recently the scalar politics. Actually, because this is very much basic contestations between the two schools, the political economic school and also the post-structuralist schools. When political economy is very much still based on, still maintain its argument along the historical material line, post-structuralist school argue that it is very much epistemological construction of scale. It's not really existent, it's not a thing, but a category of analysis for us to understand the outside world. But anyway, right now, the relational thinking of scale has been widely accepted. Scholars right now generally agree that scale in terms it's both scalar, like ladder or territory in terms of size, the both dimensions, they are not ontologically pre-given, but mobilized in socio-spatial power struggles. And this in turn give rise to particular new occasional territory configurations. But still, how can we handle the two different schools? How can it's still contestation still going on along this line. So to me, actually, the situation is here that when it comes to the literature on scale, right now the situation is that we have two different schools basically operating on different tracks. There seems to be generating a series of binary understanding of scale. For example, it is either ontological or epistemological. It is either fluid or reified. It is either networked or hierarchical. It is either political and economic. Many scholars have already cautioned against this kind of series of binary reading of scale and calling for disprivileging any single parameters and try to understanding how these are actually not opposite to each other, not exclusive to each other, but perhaps they can coexist and entangle with each other. This is very much the situation actually concerned me when I study China's new phenomenon, new experiment, try to restructure the economic landscape. we do deal with the network. First of all, in the past, perhaps China, if you anyone talk about China, first of all, the immediate image might be China is an authoritarian state. We have rigid hierarchy of administrative structures. But at the same time, networked situation, networked practice is also very, very common. So how do we handle this first binary, networked or scalar or territorial? And the second, I think, which is not really exclusive to China, but to many countries, but perhaps more evident in Chinese practices, is the political interest and the economic interest. It is always a concern for the ruling party to legitimize its ruling. So here, this is actually, I'm arguing for the two gaps I'm trying to handle through my study. First of all, I do value the surging importance of cross-boundary networking by an ensemble of actors. But still, I think networking should not be understood as something flat, as if there's a fantasy of spaceless. But network can also generate uneven development. Perhaps network generated a lot of uneven development. For example, if we follow the Castell, networking is very much about on the network or off the network. At the same time, Shepard also pointed out it is not just about on and off. Even within the network, there's also uneven development. This is something we don't understand much. We are still at a preliminary stage. And this is one thing I try to explore. How do we understand unevenness, hierarchies out of networking? The second thing for China, I try to put together the two different interests, the economic development and geopolitics, whether or not new social orders are coming into being through this networked practice. So this is why I, when it comes to the framework, this is why I found a concept by Arrighi very useful. This is actually, in the beginning, this is deployed by Cummings to illustrate the political landscape of Pacific Rim. He used the term archipelago as a metaphor to illustrate the morphology of the landscape. So Arrighi borrowed this concept to generalize to the islands of capitalism. He said that if we understand archipelago referring to islands of capitalism on the sea of horizontal exchange among local and world markets, whereas below the sea is the rest of the region with low cost and highly industrious laboring mass into which the capitalist islands thrust their roots, but not without providing them with the means needed to rise to or above sea level. Here, I think two things are very much of good utility to explore the binary between network and hierarchy. First of all, there is hierarchy. If you look at the iceberg, there's part above the sea and there's part below the sea, although they are actually very much connected. But some places are more powerful than the others, given the priority than the others. At the same time, all these islands are actually connected by network. More importantly, I think, Arrighi pointed out one thing is that if you look at the flow of things, flow of material, flow of labor, and flow of technology, the direction of these flows matters. And the direction of the flows actually determined which part will rise to above the sea level and which part will remain beneath. So this is very much, I think, very much inspiring, especially when we also link to the studies of political mobility, to look at the direction of flows, not just flows of material, but also flows of discourses, flow of some knowledge. I think the studies on policy mobilities has been fruitful on these kind of things. They argue that if you look at the geography of the knowledge flow, and that flow actually justify and widen the hierarchical relationship between the two destinations, because by enabling the flow, constructing the network actually built one part as more authentic part and the others as less authentic part. That's where they widen the unequal relationship between the two destinations. And this is the relationship, I think, very useful to understand the network practice and hierarchies. But the weakness of Arrighi's archipelago at that time is that actually he views the archipelago as a static situation. So the flow of direction is predetermined by the structure itself. And then there's no very much, the model is not very sensitive to agency to make differences. So I'm trying to look at, I borrow the concept of archipelago, but I try to reframe it through the structuration approach. And that's why I very much concur with MacKinnon when he published his idea on scalar structure, scalar politics. He said that he actually, he breaks this process, the scale. As we understand, if we agree that scale is always under construction, so perhaps we can split the process to 3 stages. First of all, to understand the pre-existing scalar structure. So this is very much about geography of actual power play, actual spatial form of governance that political actors reside in and stretch across. What's the geography of actual actors? Where are they? And at the same time, this is the agency. And then because of the agency, there's a new scale, which is give us another geography, the imagined geography, the imaginary meaningful territorial entity constructed socially, politically, and culturally. So the 3 stages give us actually methodological usage to look into different stages and identify different actors. How do they work? In what context they work? And how's the agency actually enable some new forms of skill throughout this process? So when I put them together, I'm trying to argue for a relational archipelago. I draw insight from Arrighi's idea between the network and the hierarchy. But at the same time, I try to argue that this is very much a mutual constitutive process. They both constitute each other, not just one direction. And they construct each other through the process of mobilizing both the material things and the discourse. And in this process, this is very similar to MacKinnon's 3 stages. First of all, to look at the enabling and limiting power of the pre-existing structure, and then I will look at the flows. What are on the move and their directions of flows. And then this is very something I try to argue that actually because the flows is very complex, therefore the direction may change, the types of things on the move might change. In that sense, there is chance for multiple skills to emerge. So the new skill is not a singular form. There might be a plural of new skills emerging at the same time, and one perhaps entertain particular interest, the other entertain another type of interest. And I don't have time to talk about the third one is about agency, but I will mention. I will actually mention a little bit about it, about agency. Even in the situation of China, I found that actually informal agency is very important. So let me just get started with the case of Shenzhen Fair. Look at the pre-existing scalar structures. This is, let me, first of all, let me clarify here first. The administrative structure of China's party-state apparatus has, in this case, there are 2 major actors. First, is the vertical sectors, the ministries, vertical sectors. The second is the subnational governments, the city governments here. So the one is rely on discretional power, the other is very much based on the territorial resources to claim that power. Here, if we look at Shenzhen, for those who are not really familiar with the city, Shenzhen is the first, is among one of the first city opened as a special economic zone after China's open door policy. So that's why there's a very big sculpture of Deng Xiaoping in Shenzhen to remember how he contributed to the city. So the city is actually basically built from scratch, developed from very, very small village located at the border of Hong Kong. And then this is how the city look like right now. So when the city government actually, when city government of Shenzhen is trying to look out the new trend, for them, actually, they also, for them, their vision is very much straightforward. They try to find a new economy. In the past, because Shenzhen was very much close to Hong Kong, in the past, actually, Shenzhen was positioned as a production place, the production factory behind Hong Kong. So they very much rely on Hong Kong as a special exposition-oriented special zone. But right now, Hong Kong city, Shenzhen's new vision, they try to be more than just a special zone. Right now, they very much again talk about the proximity to Hong Kong, and this time it's not just as a role model, but to be fully appropriated its intensive connections to the global market as a collaborator. So put it very straightforward, Shenzhen want to be another Hong Kong, perhaps in the long run, maybe surpass Hong Kong to be the trading port of China facing the other outside world. And so the city government actually, they assessed their own territorial resources in a meeting, a series of meetings. First of all, Shenzhen, unfortunately, doesn't really claim a rich culture. It was basically built from scratch. Okay, so in general, most people's eyes, Chinese people won't call Shenzhen the cultural desert. There's not much thing of culture going on. Everything is about business. But at the same time, the government says that their strength is not the land they owned or the people they have, but the relative mature market system, because they have been one of the first special zone. They have been completely reformed market. They have a very, in comparison to the other Chinese cities, they have more completely reformed market system. They have richness of types of privatization after its years of exposure to the market. So that's why they try to borrow another concept that has been claimed to be very successful in Guangzhou, another in Shenzhen as well. One is the Canton Fair, the other is China High-Tech Fair. All are trading events, these kind of things. So they try to use this kind of trading events, trading forum, trading fairs to convert Shenzhen to be another Hong Kong. And then the other sector of the vertical sector of the, here we actually talk about the cultural sector, the vertical sector of cultural management in Chinese government. And it has a special name called the propaganda sector. So here I just give you some, I want to give you some brief knowledge of the basic nature or the characteristic of Chinese administrative structure. This in Chinese language, this is how Chinese people describe the relationship between the national government and the city government. So the national government has a lot of vertical sectors. For example, there's ministries of transportation, ministries of commerce, ministry of culture, blah, blah, these kind of vertical sectors. These vertical sectors is like tree branches, and they weave together a basket, holding the subnational governments just like a lump of earth. So very much the vertical sectors determined the shape and size of the subnational territorial government. So this is the relationship of the national government and the city government through the vertical sector of trade branches. Okay. In particularly for this propaganda sector, this is perhaps one of the most important sector for Chinese party because the value and norm of socialism has a very imperative value for the governance of the CCP. So I don't think you need to pay attention to all these details, but I'm trying to say all these boxes actually altogether called the propaganda sector. So the rules can be disseminated from the party to the minister and then to the city level cultural bureau. So this is how they make sure power can penetrate from from party to the national government and then to the city government. But it is also true that privatization and power decentralization has going on for many, many years after the open door policy. So the one immediate result is that in the past, the propaganda sector part of the government rely on public money. Right now, actually, a lot of former state-owned enterprises has been privatized. For example, the Shenzhen Media Group and Shenzhen Circulation Group and the Shenzhen TV, all three groups have been privatized and now operating on the market. So when it comes to propaganda, it's not anymore like the socialist past, on cultural production. It is very much the propaganda department design the assignment and then send it downwards to each level of cultural bureaus. Right now, there are some autonomies for the local cultural bureaus to make decisions as well. And then for the task of Shenzhen Fair, actually can be very difficult because Shenzhen, the city, doesn't really have much culture. And secondly, Shenzhen doesn't really have much network connecting with other city government or other provincial government. So networking becomes very imperative in this process, right? In particularly, two types of networks. First of all, is cross-territorial network. If you look at this, and this is the pictures to show the Shenzhen fairs, how they look like. Actually, in this big exhibition hall, many different city or provincial government, they will have their booths here to display their products for sale, of course. This is very much a trading forum. And if you recall that for these international culture industry fairs, all these fairs has a political agenda to construct a geocultural image of China. That's why for these places to call international cultural industry fairs, especially to sell products, cultural products in China to the outside world, the very important thing is how do you define Chineseness? How do you make sure you can construct image of Chineseness? And for Chinese government, the usual strategy is very much about diversity. As many historians has argued, performing Chineseness always necessitates the demonstration of cultural diversity, which is exemplified by cross-territorial collection of vernacular culture and the regional cultural development. But vernacular culture and the local culture development are evidently area-based resources. They are not, at least for Shenzhen government, they have no right actually, or less, they must attract them to coming, but their initial attempt failed. Or nobody want to come because people don't see much incentive. Why should they come to join this fair? So how do they make sure they can build up networks between different territories. This is the first issue. So here I'm trying to show this networking process with this diagram. It looks very complex, but you can ignore most of the details. But just looking at this, Shenzhen Group, the privatized enterprise, the privatized state enterprises, is very much at the working level to invite exhibitors from different provinces, and because in the past they were part of the cultural sector, so that's why although right now they are privatized, they are still taken as our own people by the cultural sector. Because of this kind of personal networks, they share the manager, perhaps they share the leading directors of the same system. That's why the personal connection actually makes sure the Shenzhen Group can talk to the cultural sector and convince them to issue official letters. So as such, the central propaganda department are very much convinced by the idea of Shenzhen groups. And then they issued and disseminated official notice to recruit exhibitors and participants for Shenzhen for all its provincial governments. So here you are seeing propaganda department can send rules towards every city, the cultural bureau of every city. So it's the same situation here. They sent this particular notice to all the other provincial governments, and in this way, make sure all the provincial governments promise they will come and exhibit their the cultural product, the vernacular culture of different regions. So this is the output. If you look at all the different booths, all the different cultural products displayed here, they are very much diverse and they're coming from every different provinces, different cities. It is very much a collection, just like Chinese saying always that to be Chinese is trying to say we have a collective family, a big family of 56 ethnic groups. And so in this way, actually, because of the administrative order, all the provinces actually really come in and join this exhibition. Actually, if you look at the statistics, in the year of 2006, 30 of the 31 provinces, municipalities, and autonomous administrative divisions in China sent their cutting-edge cultural products to Shenzhen Fair. And this figure increased to 31 in 2010, has remained at that level, which means every single province in China have already set up the booths in Shenzhen because the administrative order. They got assignment to implement this. This is how I argue that this is very much enabling the cross-territorial flow of resources through the network of propaganda sector to make sure the influx of cultural resources, which used to be dispersed in different areas, but right now they are flowing to Shenzhen. Another thing is that another is the cross-sector networking. The propaganda sector are always working on values, norms. So they are not really good at trading. And they don't have this kind of experience. They don't have this kind of network. They know nothing about the outside world, especially overseas market. So here, the actor becomes very important. It becomes very imperative for this one to participate in this organization. This is called China Council for the Promotion of International Trade. This is by nature, this is an NGO. But this NGO was set up by the party. So in the beginning, actually in the early age of new China, when China hasn't built up democratic relationship with many countries. So the party set up this particular trade council to create trading networks with the outside world. So it also gets the nickname of the secondary ministry of foreign affairs. Because this, so if you look at the two sectors, actually Chinese vertical sectors, they are relatively independent. They have their own vested interest. So it's very difficult actually right now for different sectors to collaborate. They always protect themselves. So for these two sectors, one is very much the propaganda sector, the other is the sector of commerce. The decision for them to make a collaboration is very much made at the party level, at the state council, at the state council. And that's why, again, it is through the administrative power that the Trade Council joined the organization of Shenzhen Fair. So as you see, after the Trade Council joined the fair, it immediately used its branch in Shenzhen, also mobilized the Shenzhen groups to contribute to Shenzhen affairs. And also because the Trade Council is also the organizer of Shanghai Expo 2010, and he also made these two to collaborate, make them to be a joint events for both sides to expose to a wider world. So that's why actually all these networks to overseas markets are established, introduced by the Trade Council, because so many years he has been working on international trading, and that's why he got a lot of membership in different overseas counterparts, these kind of regional commercial bodies. And you will see, if you look at this table, it shows that when it is the 2010 when Trade Council joined the organization, and immediately the buyers, overseas buyers, increased drastically. So, and also the overall turnovers increased very frequently, just because they introduced a lot of commercial associations to this event. So this is very much cross-sector network to introduce the flux, to enable the flux of transnational capital. The third part is, again, always bear in mind that in China, when the state doing things, there's always political agenda. And this is very much true for this Shenzhen Fair. It is very much how to establish nationhood and geopolitical China, China dream. Okay, sorry for the typo. So if you remember, actually, the Trade Council is organizing both the Expo and the Shenzhen Fair. That's why they put these two events together as a joint events and introduce a wide communication with each other. And this is also why Shenzhen had a pavilion in the Shanghai Expo. Unlike many other cities, they have to share the room with others. But Shenzhen has a single standalone pavilion to exhibit its own culture. So that's why the discursive skill of nationhood, as scholars argue that actually in the time of Xi, the work on nationalism construction such as Going Abroad and China Dream forced the wealth to power pass. So the case of the Shenzhen Fair brings with it the recognition that the central issue in cultural reform is not culture per se, but the constellation of a trading zone that extract political capital from marketization of culture. So it is, again, the eventual goal is still political agenda of state space making. So this is very much made very clear by this Mr. Wang. He actually was the director of Shenzhen Cultural Bureau when that city was initiating the concept of Shenzhen Fair. And later on, because of the success of Shenzhen Fair, after the Shenzhen Fair was promoted to the whole country, he was also promoted to Beijing to work as the National Cultural Bureau. And right now he works as a think tank for the State Council. So he gave a public speech on CCTV, the central TV channel of China, saying that to explain how the political and economic interest actually help each other. So in his words, letting Shenzhen host this mega event reveals the state strategy and its will of steel to implement the strategy. The core value of a nation rests on the principal proposition of the state. For a nation without core value, it is hard to distinguish its culture and thus safeguard and develop cultural sovereignty of a country. The ICIF, the International Culture Industry Fair, Shenzhen Fair, manifests a deliberate plan towards epical cultural sovereignty upon its birth and development. Only when we tie the cultural development of a city to the destiny of the Chinese civilization that we are able to develop the cultural sovereignty of a nation. So in his words, actually, there very much is the idea of how exchange of culture may help to construct cultural sovereignty of a nation. Eventually, this idea is very much about how we right now change the strategy to cross-territorial and cross-sectoral networks to form archipelago of cities and frequently justify exchange of culture. And this idea eventually was immediately developed to the Xi'an Silk Road Expo, and then following that, further developed to the 21st century Silk Road Economic Belt, and also the Shanghai International Import Expo. So eventually, this idea helps to the national government to create an image of a national state, because to construct nationhood, everyone must support. And also, this is also a way we must go out, not just confined within the territory. The new image of the new geocultural image of China is very much resting on network, not on territories. So here, let me just briefly summarize my findings so far. The Shenzhen Fair foregrounds and forged particular infrastructure construction in both material and virtual spaces, leading to a new territorial configuration in the form of archipelago of cities. There's a new socio-spatial order. This order has both networks and hierarchies, networks that link nodal cities and others. But at the same time, all the cities that are linked by the networks actually is also in a hierarchy. There are some cities above the sea level, but there are other places below the sea level. And I didn't mention much about the agency here, but actually in the process, even in the authoritarian China, there are a lot of informal access of power, informal communications to cut across the rigid administrative structure so as to encourage, to facilitate the collaboration between different territories and the collaboration between different sectors. So that means it is very much contingent as well. The archipelago of cities goes through a dynamic process with some regions consolidated, extended, upscaled, where others phased out. So here actually, for example, Shenzhen still rise above the sea, but many other cities who also try to practice this kind of a thing didn't really work well that much. And I also want to stress, actually, through this process, there are two geographies of economic and geopolitical interest emerged, two new skills. We do have one new skill of Shenzhen city rise as the global node on the economic landscape. But at the same time, we also have a national skill of virtual space. And actually, the national skill of China is very much about the political dream and fantasy. And that's not really contained within the boundary of China, but very much can be extended and stretched through the networks, for example, through the Silk Road and through the international import-export. Okay, so so this is basically my study on this project. And your comments are very much appreciated.
Thank you a lot, June, for your fascinating talk. It's been very interesting to know about this creative city strategy cross-color through creative fairs in China, and how it is connected to issues of nationhood and also of international expansion of Chinese commercial interests. In the meantime, I want to say hello to Professor Montresor, who has joined the meeting after our seminar, after his meeting with the administration. And Professor Montresor, Sandro is the main organizer of this webinar series. So thanks, many thanks to him. I don't know, Sandro, if you want to say something. He's I saw him online. Okay, maybe after the second part. Okay, we have already a couple of questions. As I said, in this first part, we reserve questions only for clarification reasons. We reserve the questions touching on more substantive issues for the second part after the break. So also these two questions that I read now from the chat, that everyone who is in the Google Meet room can read. I think they touch on more substantive issues, so we can deal with them afterwards. So if there is no specific question for the moment about some obscure points in June's presentation, I think we can have a 10 minutes, 7-minute break. We can restart at 11:05, let's say. Okay, 11:03, 11:05. So in 8 minutes we will restart. Thank you.
Chiudimi per favore questa porta.
Posso ripetere?
Un secondo.
Mettila. Mettila.
Un po' collega.
Okay. We can restart the seminar with our second part dedicated to the debate on June's talk. We have here our colleague Sandro, Professor Montresor. Sandro is the main organizer of this webinar series, so we have to thank him for his efforts and for putting together this great lineup of scholars from different countries and from different also disciplinary perspectives and in the field of regional science and economic geography. So please, Sandro.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Hugo. First of all, welcome to June, and it's very nice to meet you, although in a say web way, not really in person. First of all, please apologize me for not having been able to be here before, but these are very intense and complicated days, so I was not able to be here since the beginning, but I follow up. I caught up actually later on, and I actually realized that the topic was really very interesting. So apologize me for telling now what I would have liked to tell at the beginning. That is, we are very proud and happy to have you here in the webinar. And first of all, we are also very delighted and proud to have you in our teaching committee of the PhD program in regional science and economic geography. I don't know whether Hugo has had the chance to tell this at the beginning, but June is actually part of the committee, so we will be delighted and happy and proud also to have her on board. And I think that her contribution will definitely be very, very important, okay? So thank for that. Thank for being part of the teaching committee of our PhD, and double thank for being here today and for delivering this interesting topic about which I'm sure there will be a lot of discussion and debate in the remaining hour, okay? Thank you very much again. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Sandro.
You're welcome.
Okay, we can start debating June's talk. We can start from the two questions we have received from people attending in the Google Meet room. June, can you read the two questions? I will read them loudly also for people attending through YouTube. Abir Alaham says, very interesting lecture, thank you. My question is about the power distribution in China. You mentioned there is different scales, but I felt they are all related to the state authorities. Power is either in the hands of the central authority or with the city local governments. Where is the local community in the scala, and what is its role in decision-making processes? So it's about the role of community, if it's an active actor or if it's just dominated by local and state authorities, as far as I understand. Please.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. A very interesting question indeed. And let me see. Because of the time, I have to cut off a lot of things. But there is space for the community, but that is very much dependent on which level the community can participate and on what kind of a topic. Decision on what. I don't think the community, for example, still, it is also a dynamic process. How much the community can participate is also change along the time. So let me see, from the very beginning, that's 2004, when the city government tried to initiate this Shenzhen Fair. At that time, actually, Shenzhen was also very successfully the first Chinese city get into the UNESCO Creative City of Network. So in that exercise, the community, especially the professional communities like design and printing, these kind of sectors are very important in terms of how do they design a proposal. And perhaps if you look at another thing is that about the Shanghai Expo, when Shenzhen Pavilion was in the Shenzhen Pavilion, if you pay attention to the facade of Shenzhen Pavilion in Shanghai Expo, the pavilion is an image of Mona Lisa, and that Mona Lisa is made of over 500 pixel puzzles painted by local painters in Shenzhen. So what I'm trying to say is that the community has chance to participate, but they were usually, I'm afraid, for most of the occasions, they were more instrumental rather than really be able to have a say. But if you look at different, very different small cases, different procedures, you will see there are also resistance, contestations. Yes, sometimes, for example, the local painters win, and the local government have to compromise. But for most of the other big decisions, when it comes to political agenda, the space for the community is very limited. Is it fine? I answered the question. Ugo, I think your microphone is off.
Yeah, sorry. I mean, I was trying to say if Abir Alham wants to add anything, because I can see him or her online. So if it's okay, we can, yeah.
Hello, can I add something? Yeah, this is
please.
Abir Alham. Yeah, thank you, Dr. Wang, for your very interesting lecture. But I was quite interested with the model of the Chinese power structure. But from your lecture, I found out that it is not kind of, as you said, horizontal and vertical, but ultimately it is kind of same capitalist power structure, which is top-down, vertical, but it is more or less decentralized within the authorities' body. The representations and institutions of the authorities. So I couldn't find the networking that you mentioned, which makes it a little different than the other power structure models. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. In general, I think, yes, it is very much within the statist capitalism. Still so in China, I'm afraid. Maybe even more authoritarian in the time of Xi's government. And as if the power structure, not on this particular project, but in some other, for example, I'm working also with my PhD student on the planning sector, how the master plan, how master plan of cities are carried out in that process. There are spaces actually there are chances for the local community, especially experts, to have a say, to get into the power structure, but not on this trade. My understanding is that perhaps for some particular projects, for example, these kind of international fairs, because the government, the national government, is very much, they also make a deal with the local government. They give local government a lot of incentives, a lot of autonomy to determine what kind of local economic strategy they're going to carry it out. But in return, they do expect everything, must be politically correct, in line with the political agenda. In that sense, on this kind of project, if they have a political agenda going on at the same time, I don't think the community can have a position in the structure. Or maybe if you look at the privatized SOEs, privatized state-owned enterprises, these elites, they have a position in the power structure.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Abir, and thank you, June, for your answer. The second question, again, is written, I don't know if Ezeik Ola Niran, who is from University of Ibadan in Nigeria, if he or she wants to read the question, but he or she writes, I think it's he. Thank you for this interesting lecture. Could you please expatiate more on the concept cultural desert? Are you saying some cities, or Shenzhen in particular, have no culture, or they are cultural deficient?
Thank you for the question. People will argue with me. Some people say you cannot say there's no culture. That depends on how do you define culture. If you follow the concept that so I forgot his name. But anyway, if you forgot the concept that culture is is about everyday's life, and then that of course is culture. The culture desert is a Chinese term. I just directly translated to English. By that Chinese term, many other Chinese people in other places, in their eyes, Shenzhen, and that was in the early 80s. Shenzhen was still a fishing village, a very small fishing village, and then it was quickly developed to a very modern city. And efficiency has always been the norm. And because this is very much instant city making, most people actually, 80% of Shenzhen people are actually migrants from somewhere else. So in that sense, they always argue that those migrants from somewhere else just go to Shenzhen to work, and especially to work on the business sector. So they talk about efficiency, they never talk about some other things. So this is more like just more like other people. In the mind of Chinese people, if you talk about culture, you will naturally link to history, tradition, this kind of thing, a vernacular culture. Whether you have a rich history, and then so you can talk about culture. But Shenzhen, because of the short history, because of the migrants and the diverse background, and because most people are very much come here to work, but have not yet been able to build up the identity of Shenzhen people. So that's why the other Chinese people, in their eyes, they call Shenzhen as cultural desert. There is cultural industries going on, actually, especially the design and publishing industry in Shenzhen is quite strong. That sector is strong because that sector was migrated from Hong Kong to Shenzhen. So that's the basic situation. Okay.
So I add only something to this question, because I was already thinking, would you question the representation of Shenzhen as the creative capital of China? Shenzhen was known in the 80s as one of the drivers of the manufacturing boom of China in the Pearl River Delta region. And so now we are kind of witnessing a sort of using a category that was used with reference to Western capitalist countries, kind of post-Fordist, post-industrial transition of Shenzhen, in which manufacturing becomes less relevant and the cultural sector becomes the engine of growth, of economic growth. Is this representation that we receive from mainstream discourse, from public discourse, is this representation of Shenzhen as the creative capital of China due to architecture, design, these kind of sectors that you said have been imported from Hong Kong mainly? So this is it correct, or is just a construction, a discursive construction, or there is some truth in a way?
Shenzhen is changing very quickly. Now, let's say at the time of 2004, when Shenzhen got into the UNESCO network of creative cities, that was a shock to most Chinese people, because people don't believe there was creative sector in that city. And I read the proposal actually submitted by the Shenzhen government to UNESCO, and it's mainly about the sector of publishing and design, again, moved from Hong Kong to Shenzhen. And also it's mainly about the ambition. How do they plan to become a creative city rather than to claim they are already a creative city? Mm-hmm. In that sense, there is truth, some truth. But later on, you will see Shenzhen right now, it's very much about knowledge, let's say, knowledge-based economy. Shenzhen is very strong in terms of technology. Most of the new, for example, Tencent, Huawei, ZTE, all these high-tech firms are in Shenzhen. So, right, and also I also study painters in Shenzhen, especially street painters. I'm trying to argue that they are culture as well. So right now there are quite a lot of cultural things going on.
Okay, thank you. Maybe we can get back to this issue, because it's very interesting, the process of creative city making or even invention that we have found also in other contexts, in which creative city is more an aspiration than a reality. You know, an aspiration in the minds of some city planners and local governments. I studied a kind of similar situation in the context of Baltimore in the United States. In the about now, I studied it about 15 years ago. So I think it's a kind of a common future of creative city making policies across the globe. The fact of inventing the creative city in many contexts. This process of invention is, especially in this context of knowledge-based economy, of high-tech economy, gives the illusion that you can create everything. You know, like turning a city that was known as a manufacturing hub into a creative city, just because you are a kind of you know as a planner or as a city government how to make it. Let's see other question. Zoomin Zhu. Thank you, June. I enjoyed the talk. Can you elaborate more on the informal agency part?
You skipped Abir's question, I think. The research published, not yet. I'm trying to revising it. So I really appreciate any comments and critiques. It's under revision after the first submission, but it took me a long time because I was interrupted by many other things, and I'm also struggling with the new concept, because when I first started writing that paper, that was 2016, and at that time I want to say right now I a little bit disagree with my argument at that time, and I'm not very that let's say I'm not completely in line with the the political economic approach. Right now I tend to use assemblage to look at the state. So I'm struggling with this paper right now because I'm struggling with myself. Anyway, Zhu Ming's question. The informal agency apart, informal agency. Yeah, this is very a very interesting part, because we always believe that in China, when we talk about informal agency, actually we talk about the behavior of the officials. Usually, the studies on Chinese government officials, cadres, because of this very serious systematic cadre management systems. That's why we tend to believe that there are a lot of regulations, and officials usually follow the, at least they will make use of the formal administration channel to talk to each other. They follow the routine rather than just improvise. But here in this case, I do find that many officials improvised a lot, and they have a lot of I don't want to call it underground deal, but anyway, for example, the communication within the sector of propaganda, the officials at the very top, when they talk to the official to Shenzhen, they do have a lot of private conversations. They exchange ideas, and because this very much not really, let's say, formal conversation, which means it can be publicized because they may break some rules. So that's why they see in a very, very indicative way. It is more like a game of guessing. The officials at the city level has to guess what exactly the officials from Beijing means when he says that way. And also there's also a lot of conversations between the privatized SOEs with the cultural sector. And they try to make use of the past relationship. They used to be working in the same building, they know each other, they have each other's phones. So all these kind of communications, I think this is very much not really, without these kind of communications, because they are very much related on personal network, there's no chance for this Shenzhen Fair to really develop to be this kind of today's situation, which means again, when that model was promoted to other cities, without the personal connection, other cities, it will be very difficult to implement this model. Yeah, I'm not sure if I answered your question.
Yes, thank you. There is one question from Sarah Karamaski. Sarah, she's a postdoctoral researcher at our institute in urban studies. So please, Sarah.
Yes, here I am. Hi, thank you, Professor Wang, for your presentation. I have a question about the emerging contestations and forms of this content that you mentioned in one of your previous answers. And it's about if you think, are these emerging contestations related to the top-down discourse of making creative and cultural, let's say, cultural cities, or if they are more against the way the Shenzhen tech-driven economy is penetrating and changing the everyday life, or let's say the urban space where people are living. So my question is more about, it's a broader question, it's not related especially to the Shenzhen Fair, but it's more about how these forms of resistance are emerging, and if they are related to the creation of creative cities, or if they are related to the way creative cities and cultural cities are changing the everyday relations in cities. Thank you.
Okay. It's a very big question. I studied street painters for quite a few years. I'm not sure if you're familiar with this kind of industry. Street painters means they copy masterpieces. That's also another friend working on street painter. For example, Van Gogh. Van Gogh's masterpieces. There's a village in Shenzhen full of these kind of street painters. They're working on copies of replicas of masterpieces. And economically, they are very successful, because if you look at hotels, not just in China, in the whole world, 19% of the paintings hanging in the hotel are from that particular village. So the government liked it very much, because it's very much economically viable. But on the other hand, the government don't like the idea of street painting, especially China fake becomes a very kind of a discourse imposed on many other Chinese sectors. And this is also true when China trying to develop its economy, like technology economy or creative economy. Chinese people always fake, copy other people's ideas. So the government actually introduced quite a lot of measures. On one hand, they want this industry to sustain because it's very vibrant, contribute a lot to GDP, especially contribute to the cultural part. And the other side is that they don't like the image of trade painting, which looks like, sounds like you're not really about painting, you're not authentic, you're not an artist, you are just a worker on making copies. So there are a number of measures imposed on the street painters, and they do fight back against these rules. And then it's a very complicated situation. It's very much long process. In this process, a lot of people, because there are a lot of different actors, from dealers, many of them from Hong Kong, they are also trying to make a profit. Also many painters, and also so while they have to make a living, most of painters, they are not really educated. Most of them are migrant workers from the former farmers from villages. They come here, accept basic training, and they start to make money out of this. So they do believe, many of them, when I interview them, many of them do believe that they are working on culture. They are different from those migrant workers working in factories, or on construction site. They think they are white collar. No, they work on something artistic. So they do have passion, and they do hope one day they can become part of the artist. They have the, they can be become member of an artist association. So they also, on one hand, the sad thing is that if the government imposed the rules too heavily, they will fight back. They demonstrated a lot, especially during 2008, because the global financial crisis, they don't get a lot of commissions. So they demonstrated a lot, but at the same time, they also trying to self-governing themselves. They try to say, I want to be a real artist, authentic artist, rather than just making other people's copies. So this is very complicated situation.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you, June, for your answer. There is one more question from Ezekiel Olaniran, who says, my second question, please. What is the limit of city government power in resource management and control?
I'm not sure if I understand the question correctly. Do you mean in general, all the resources within the boundary of the city?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Yeah, I'm Ezekiel Olaniran from University of Ibadan. I mean, the resources within the city boundary. What is the limit of city government power in resource management and control?
This very much, again, a very complicated question because, there's, as I mentioned before, there's vertical sector and there's a city government. So for example, when it comes to culture development, the cultural sector is still very vertical, which means when the party, especially the government propaganda department in Beijing, when they have a new idea, new assignment, they will send the message, send the rule vertically downwards to every cultural bureau in the cities. So in this sense, city government, they don't usually intervene into this cultural production. If they want to, they can, but they don't usually do that. And another thing is that another interesting thing about land. Land has been studied very intensively on this situation. For example, in one city, in the Shenzhen city, the land supposed to be managed by the urban land is supposed to be managed by the city government. But if there's a state-owned enterprise, for example, Shenzhen Media Group, this is SOE. It is privatized, but in the past, it was part of the cultural sector. And some of these SOEs, because they are so powerful, they listen to their superior, the vertical sector, and they don't have to listen to the city government. And the land of their SOEs, within the SOE, the land, the SOE has the right to manage the land. The city government don't. The city government doesn't have the right to intervene into the territory of SOEs. For some cases, not all of them, but for some cases, especially for the very strong SOEs. So, so there are quite a lot of limits actually, but again, there's also a way for the city government to negotiate with SOEs. For example, if they want to use the land. In Shenzhen, the situation is the very interesting situation. Many scholars are studying is very much about the urban village. Urban village, the land used to be collectively managed by villagers, not by the city government. But the city government has many ways to convert the village land to urban land, and then afterwards they can control. So there are quite a limits, but there's always a way to curbing this limitation. I'm not sure if I confused you more.
Thank you. Hope, Ezekiel, if
Thank you very much.
You're satisfied with the response. Okay. I don't know if there are.
I'm okay.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for your contribution. I'm not sure if there are other questions. there are the questions. Can you please turn off the microphone? Otherwise, there is interference. Thank you. Okay. I'm not sure if our colleague Alessandro Crociata at our institute, he has now disconnected for personal reasons, but he was asking how you can map the flows across the relational archipelago of cities. I mean, it's more like a methodological question on your mapping technique.
Sorry, can you repeat?
How you can map the flows across the archipelago, the flows of information exchanges across or through the archipelago of cities that you were describing. So, I mean, what kind of methodologies you have adopted to investigate this archipelago of cities? It's a kind of multi-site research methodology, or it's through following the flows, you know?
Okay. So about the flows, actually, right now it's still the starting point. So right now I just following the flows. There's no scientific mapping of these flows. For example, because this happens only once every year, so I can trace how many different provincial government, city government send their products over, and what are the trading, actually, what are the, how many contracts they have signed during exhibition time. Now, actually, the trade council, they will develop the report, and they kindly share the report with me. So this is how I trace their flows. But there are some other ways, actually. Some of my colleagues in Wuhan, they are trying to use GIS to trace this kind of flows of firm-to-firm relationship. So they are, but also including the kind of one-off flow of cultural products. So they use GIS, but I don't really understand much about the methodology.
Okay. I want to ask, in the meantime, if there is no more question, I'm curious to know more about the relationship between the famous Silk Road initiative, new Silk Road initiative pursued by the Chinese state, and this cultural strategy. You mentioned the initiative, because we usually associate the new Silk Road initiative with export. We usually understand it as an export strategy for material goods, you know, like manufactured goods through ports and through other commercial routes. It's quite conventional in terms of commercial, as a commercial strategy, at least the way it is depicted customarily. But is there also a cultural strategy of which these cultural fairs, this investment in Shenzhen is part? Are the two things interconnected? Is there an ambition to add a cultural value to the Silk Road initiative?
You mean Shenzhen, or you mean the Silk Road?
The Silk Road. The Silk Road.
Silk Road.
Yeah.
Silk Road is this is pretty new, only starting from 2013. As for the Silk Road, it's not just confined within cultural products, but any products, especially, for example, silk. Not, of course, you can see silk is also cultural, but anyway, most they don't really have a special limitation to specify what kind of products will be transacted in a Silk Road exposition. So everything can be included in that Silk Road exposition. But in particular, because they have also this kind of intention to encourage the cross-country communication, especially cross-country cultural communication. I think one particular industry right now they are encouraging is, first of all, music, second, film. How do they collaborate in film together, and how do they collaborate with music products together? And also it's through, I think, also by cultural products. They very much, I think Chinese government is also, not necessarily Chinese government, but many professional sectors, they are trying to copy the model of Korean model of export TV programs, export their different live shows, and also invite, for example, in China, a lot of kind of cultural live shows in TV channels. They also try to involve overseas artists to get into this. So that's basically what I know.
Okay, thank you very much, June. If there is no more questions, I think we can stop here. We had a great conversation today. I'm very happy, and I really hope that we will be able also, because of the conditions related to the global emergency of the pandemic, to invite you in person to teach to our current and future PhD students, because I want to remind to all that we are currently, we have an open, we have 2 positions have added to the 7 that we originally announced, PhD positions in regional science and economic geography. So please spread the word, and please invite promising and intellectually ambitious students to apply for these positions if they are interested in pursuing a research project in this field. So thanks, June, and we really hope to have you in L'Aquila sooner or later. But one time, I mean, everything, all this mess at the global level will be finished. Hopefully, I think it's inevitable that will end sooner or later. So we will be able to travel again, not too much, because we have to moderate our travel for our health and for the health of the planet, I think, but moderate but well-intentioned travel to make academic connections and to reflect together on what is happening in our research context. I think it's really worthwhile, and I think it's worth still keeping this kind of practice. So thanks, June, for this excellent talk, and we will keep in touch. And let me see if I see 2 messages. Okay, these are some greetings from the floor, from Abira Alham and from Sarah Karamaski. Okay, thank you. And one second, I check if I manage to let me see if I manage to show my screen. No, because it's well, I want just to remind that the next seminar will be next Thursday from 3 to 5 in the afternoon Central European time, and will be given by Professor Simona Iammarino, from London School of Economics. On the title of her talk will be How Monopoly, Technology, and Finance Drive Regional Inequality. So we will look at the relationship between technology, finance, and regional inequalities, which is a very hot topic in today's not only academic but also public debates. Thank you again, June, and thank you everyone for attending this event. I hope to see you all next Thursday. Thank you and bye.
And thank you, Ugo. And thank you to Sarah and Abir for your questions. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.